They told you Benedict Bridgerton was safe. They told you he was the one who would never fall. And for 4 seasons, you believed them. You were wrong. There is a specific kind of person that every family produces. Not the heir, not the rebel, not the one who carries the weight of expectation like a stone around his neck from the moment he is old enough to understand what expectation means. No, every family produces one person who exists slightly to the side of all of that. The one who watches, the one who smiles at the chaos without being consumed by it, the one who has, through some quiet and deliberate act of self-preservation, managed to construct a life that the rules of his world cannot fully reach. In the Bridgerton family, that person was Benedict, and that is precisely why what is happening in season 5 is so much more devastating than anything this show has done before. Benedict Bridgerton was not untouched by the world he lived in. He understood it completely. He understood its cruelty, its precision, its ability to destroy a person not through violence but through something far more surgical, the slow, deliberate withdrawal of belonging. He watched it happen to people around him. He studied it the way an artist studies shadow, not because he wanted to paint it, but because he needed to know exactly where the darkness fell so he could make sure he was never standing inside it. That was his entire strategy. Not rebellion, not defiance, simply positioning. Stay close enough to the fire to feel warm, stay far enough away to never get burned. For years, it worked. While Anthony was drowning in duty and Colin was stumbling through his own quietly complicated heart, Benedict floated. That is the only word for it. He floated through seasons, through ballrooms, through conversations that could have trapped lesser men, with an ease that looked effortless because he had spent years making sure it would look exactly that way. His charm was not accidental. His lightness was not careless. It was architecture, carefully, deliberately, invisibly constructed so that the world would see a man who needed nothing and therefore could not be threatened by the withdrawal of anything. And then Sophie Beckett walked into his life, and the architecture collapsed, not dramatically, not in a single moment that could be pointed to and analyzed and defended against. That is not how the most important destructions happen. The most important destructions happen slowly, in small moments that do not announce their significance until it is far too late to do anything about them. A conversation that lasted slightly longer than it should have. A look that carried something underneath it that Benedict did not have a name for. A moment of genuine laughter, not the performed kind, not the social kind, but the kind that escapes before you can catch it, and suddenly the distance he had spent years maintaining felt not like safety but like loss. That is what Sophie did to Benedict Bridgerton. She did not chase him. She did not try to dismantle what he had built. She simply existed, fully and completely and without apology, in a way that made his carefully maintained distance feel, for the first time in his life, like something he did not actually want. Now here is what the season 5 trailer understands that most people watching it have not yet fully processed. Benedict falling for Sophie is not just a love story. It is a structural crisis, because Sophie Beckett does not belong in Benedict's world, not according to the rules, not according to the hierarchies that Regency London has spent generations constructing with the kind of obsessive, meticulous care that only a society built entirely on perception could manage. Sophie exists in a space that the ton has no comfortable category for. She cannot be easily filed. She cannot be neatly placed. And in a world where placement is everything, where knowing exactly who someone is and exactly where they stand is the foundation upon which every social interaction is built, a woman who cannot be placed is not simply inconvenient, she is dangerous. And Benedict, who has spent his entire life staying carefully outside the fire, has walked directly into the center of it. Not because he was careless, not because he was naive, but because Sophie made the distance feel like the wrong choice. And that specific realization, arriving too late, in a world that does not forgive the moment of hesitation, may cost him everything he spent his life protecting. The trailer knows this. Every single frame of it knows this, and it is not being gentle about what it is telling you. But here is the question nobody is asking yet: if Benedict knew exactly how this world punishes people who step outside its rules, if he watched it happen again and again with his own eyes, why did he step anyway? What did Sophie show him that made the risk feel worth taking? And more importantly, does she even know what she has already set in motion just by existing in his orbit? There is a particular kind of intelligence that the world never properly accounts for. Not the intelligence of drawing rooms and debate. Not the intelligence of men who were handed books and tutors and quiet libraries and told that thinking was their birthright. No, there is another kind entirely. The kind that develops not in comfort but in its complete absence. The kind that grows in the gaps between what you are permitted and what you actually need. The kind that sharpens itself daily against the hard, unforgiving edge of a world that was built entirely without you in mind and has absolutely no intention of apologizing for that. Sophie Beckett has that intelligence. She has had it her entire life. And season 5 is about to show you exactly how dangerous that makes her, not to Benedict, not to the ton, but to the version of this story that everyone assumed they already knew. Sophie does not arrive in Benedict's world the way other women in this show have arrived in the lives of Bridgerton men. She does not come with the social infrastructure that made Daphne's story possible. She does not come with the quiet wandering freedom that eventually found Colin. She comes with something that is simultaneously more powerful and more precarious than either of those things. She comes with clarity, a specific, hard-earned, absolutely unromantic clarity about exactly what the world she is stepping into costs people like her. She has not read about it. She has not observed it from a comfortable distance and drawn thoughtful conclusions. She has lived it. She has paid it. She understands the economy of Regency London's social world not as theory but as daily, lived, unavoidable reality. And that understanding, that complete, unsentimental awareness of exactly what she is walking into, is what makes her presence in this story so extraordinarily complicated, because she is not walking in blind. That is the thing. That is the thing the trailer keeps showing you in the spaces between the obvious moments, in the quality of her stillness, in the way her eyes move through a room and land on things that other characters have not yet noticed. Sophie Beckett sees everything. She has always had to. When your position in the world is uncertain, when the space you occupy is one that the existing rules have not properly accounted for, you develop a sensitivity to your environment that people who have always been safe simply do not possess. You notice the shift in someone's expression before they have finished composing it. You hear the change in a room's energy before the room itself has decided to acknowledge it. You understand, at a level that operates below conscious thought, when something is being calculated in your direction. Sophie has been reading rooms her entire life because rooms have always had the potential to turn against her without warning, and she is reading this one right now. In every scene the trailer gives us, she is reading Benedict, and she is reading the world around Benedict, and she is reading the gap between those two things, the gap between who he is privately and what his world demands publicly, with the kind of precision that only someone who has always had to calculate her own survival could manage. She is not romantic about it. She cannot afford to be. Romanticism is a luxury that belongs to people whose position is secure enough to survive the consequences of being wrong. Sophie's position has never been that secure. Not once. Not for a single day of her life. And so she brings to this situation something that Benedict, for all his intelligence and charm and genuine emotional depth, fundamentally does not have. She brings the knowledge of exactly what losing looks like, not in the abstract, not as a social inconvenience, but as the complete, structural, no recovery possible collapse of everything you were trying to build, and yet she is still here. That is the thing that should be stopping you in your tracks right now, because it stopped me. Sophie Beckett, who understands the risks better than anyone else in this situation, who has calculated the costs with the kind of cold, clear-eyed precision that comes from a lifetime of having no margin for error, has not retreated. She has not stepped back to the safer distance that every single thing she knows about this world would logically recommend. She is present, fully, deliberately, consciously present in a situation that her own intelligence is telling her is dangerous. And that choice, that specific, quiet, completely unannounced choice to remain anyway, tells you more about who Sophie Beckett actually is than any dramatic declaration ever could. She is not staying because she does not understand the danger. She is staying because she has decided, with complete awareness, that it is worth it. Now think about what that means in the context of this world. Think about what it means for a woman in Regency London, in a position as precarious as Sophie's, to look at a situation that carries genuine, structural, life-altering risk and decide that the thing on the other side of that risk is worth the price. That is not naivety. That is not recklessness. That is a form of courage that this show has never quite shown us before in this particular shape. Previous Bridgerton love stories have had stakes, of course they have, but those stakes always existed within a certain framework. There was always a floor, always a point below which the consequences could not fall because the people involved had enough social standing, enough family protection, enough of the right last name to cushion the impact of even the worst outcome. Sophie does not have that floor. If this goes wrong, not just romantically wrong, but socially wrong, publicly wrong, in the way that Regency London specializes in making things go wrong for people, it has decided to make an example of there is no cushion. There is no family name to absorb the blow. There is no title to retreat behind while the storm passes. There is only the fall itself. And Sophie knows this. She has always known this. And she is here anyway. But here is what the trailer is very carefully not showing you yet. It is not showing you whether Benedict fully understands this, whether he has genuinely grasped what Sophie's presence in his life costs her in a way that has cost him absolutely cannot. Because Benedict's worst case scenario and Sophie's worst case scenario are not the same scenario. They never were. And the moment that gap in understanding becomes visible, the moment Sophie realizes that the man she has chosen to remain for does not yet fully comprehend the distance between their respective floors, that is not just a romantic complication. That is the moment this entire season catches fire, because the real question was never whether Benedict and Sophie could find their way to each other. The real question, the one the trailer has been building toward from its very first frame, is whether Benedict will understand what Sophie already knows before the ton makes the decision for both of them, and what happens to everything between them if he understands it one moment too late. There is something you need to understand about the ton before you can understand what Benedict and Sophie are actually walking into. Something that the show has always gestured toward, but that season 5 appears determined to make completely, uncomfortably explicit. The ton is not a collection of judgmental people with too much time and too many opinions. That is the comfortable version. That is the version that makes it easy to watch and easy to dismiss and easy to feel slightly superior to, because surely we would not behave that way. Surely we are better than that. Surely the cruelty of that world is something that belongs to another era and could not possibly still resonate. No, the ton is a machine. A specific, deliberate, extraordinarily well-maintained machine that was built for one purpose and one purpose only: the preservation of its own existing order. And like all machines built for preservation, it does not respond well to elements. It was not designed to accommodate. It does not pause to consider. It does not extend grace. It does not ask questions before it acts. It simply identifies the threat, mobilizes its mechanisms, and eliminates the disruption with efficiency that is almost beautiful in how completely it lacks mercy. Sophie Beckett is a disruption, not because she chose to be, not because she arrived with any intention of challenging anything, but because her very existence in Benedict's orbit creates a question that the ton's existing architecture cannot answer comfortably. and a question it cannot answer comfortably is a question it will work to erase. That is what the Season 5 trailer is showing you in every scene that lingers slightly too long on a background figure. In every moment where a secondary character's expression shifts in a way that has nothing to do with the main conversation happening in the foreground. In every carefully composed frame where someone is watching something they were not supposed to witness but very clearly have, the machine is already running. It started the moment Sophie became visible in Benedict's world, and Benedict and Sophie, caught in the particular blindness that comes from being inside a feeling rather than observing it from a safe distance, have not yet fully understood how far along the process already is. This is how Regency London actually works, and this is what makes it so much more frightening than any villain with a face and a name could ever be. It does not announce itself. It does not confront. Confrontation is messy and leaves evidence and requires a level of emotional investment that the Tan, as a collective organism, considers deeply beneath its dignity. Instead, it accumulates, it gathers, it files, a piece of information here, an observed moment there, a name mentioned in a conversation that shifts the energy of the room in a way that everyone notices and nobody acknowledges, a look exchanged between two people at a dinner party that lasts precisely long enough for three other people to notice and precisely short enough that nothing could ever be said directly about it. This is the currency of power in this world, not gold, not titles, not even genuine influence in any meaningful sense. Information, specifically, the strategic possession of information at the precise moment when deploying it will cause the maximum possible damage to the person it concerns, and Benedict has handed this machine an extraordinary amount of information simply by allowing himself to feel what he feels in a world that treats feeling as evidence. Every moment he has spent in Sophie's presence that was witnessed by anyone other than himself has been catalogued somewhere. Every conversation that ran longer than social convention would neatly explain. Every instance where his famous ease became something slightly less easy, slightly more present, slightly more real, and therefore slightly more readable to anyone paying attention has been noted. Benedict has spent his entire life understanding this world well enough to move through it safely. But understanding a machine from the outside and being inside it while it runs are two entirely different experiences. And right now, Benedict is inside it, feeling things he has never felt before, in front of people who have been trained from birth to notice exactly that. The trailer shows you this not through dramatic confrontation but through something far more unsettling: atmosphere. The shift in how spaces feel when certain combinations of people occupy them. The particular quality of a silence that follows a name being spoken. The way a room that should feel celebratory carries underneath its surface noise something that feels unmistakably like surveillance. This is Bridgerton Season 5 operating at a level of sophistication that the earlier seasons, for all their brilliance, did not quite reach. Because earlier seasons always gave you a clear antagonist, a Lady Berbrook whose cruelty had a face, a social obstacle that could be identified, and therefore, eventually, overcome. Season 5 appears to be doing something far more ambitious and far more honest about how this world actually functions. It is giving you an antagonist that has no single face, no identifiable villain, just the machine itself, running exactly as designed, doing precisely what it was built to do, and being absolutely devastating in its normalcy. What makes this particularly suffocating for Benedict specifically is the position it places him in relative to his own family. Because the Bridgerton name has always been the floor, the thing that caught them when they fell, Anthony could survive his reputation as a rake because the viscountcy was underneath him. Colin could stumble through his romantic disasters because the family's collective standing absorbed the impact. Even Daphne, whose situation carried genuine scandal at its edges, had the full weight of Lady Bridgerton's composure and the family's social positioning working in her direction. Benedict has always known this floor existed. He has always relied on it, quietly and without examining the reliance too closely, because it has always been there. But season 5 is beginning to ask a question that Benedict has never had to seriously consider before. What happens when the situation you have walked yourself into is not simply scandalous but structurally threatening? What happens when the floor that has always caught you is made of reputation, and the thing you are doing is actively eroding the very foundation it stands on? What happens when protecting Sophie requires Benedict to spend a currency that does not belong only to him, that belongs to his mother, his siblings, his family's entire social future, in a world that charges interest on exactly that kind of expenditure? The trailer does not answer this. It is too intelligent to answer this yet. Instead, it shows you the edges of it. The moments where the warmth that has always characterized the Bridgerton family feels slightly less certain than it used to, where figures who previously represented stability are shown carrying expressions that suggest their own ground is less solid than it appeared, where the ripple effects of Benedict's choices are already moving outward in directions he has not yet traced. This is what the machine does. It does not only come for the person it has identified as the disruption. It comes for everything connected to that person. It applies pressure at every point of contact. It makes the people around you feel the cost of standing beside you. And then it waits, patiently, with the particular patience of something that has done this before and knows exactly how it ends. And it has done this before.